Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Bishop. I'm VP Marketing and Experience for the Canadian Marketing Association, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here for our Marketing Connected Live. This is our third edition of Marketing Connected Live, and we're excited to have John Wiltshire, President and CEO of the Canadian Marketing Association, back to host today, and with our special guest, Jan Kestle, President and CEO of Environics Analytics. We've got a great conversation planned, and the focus of today's conversation with John interviewing Jan is going to be how data can make public spaces safer as we approach recovery. And so with that, I would like to introduce our President and CEO, John Wiltshire. John, over to you. I hope you have a great conversation, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Tim, and welcome, Jan. How are you today, Jan?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Jan serves on our board and of the CMA, where she chairs our Audit and Finance Committee. But I've always enjoyed Jan's presence in board meetings because she always speaks from a very factual perspective. And so it's great to have you with us today. And I know also, Jan, that you are a very busy person in between launching major products for Environics Analytics, as well as serving as an expert resource for the government during these times. You and I are both from London, Ontario, and we both attended the Western University. Can you give us a little bit of a background on how you got to where you are today in terms of how you got into this type of profession and as well, like what has changed through the years that you've been involved in the profession?
Sure. Before I do that, John, though, I just want to mention what a great job you and the CMA staff are doing during this difficult time. The great content and the events that you're putting on that are supplying marketers with really crucial information. So I want to take a moment to salute you for that and thank you and Tim and the rest of the staff. Yeah, well, I went to Western a little bit before you, but I went there to study math because that was my passion. And, I graduated in applied math, which is kind of like physics and math. But the first job that I had was at the Ontario Statistical Centre. It was an Ontario government job, and I was a junior clerk. And I thought it was great because I loved the way that you could always tell stories with mathematics. So I ended up staying there and eventually running that group, which was a small group because statistics aren't really a provincial responsibility. But I had the opportunity there to work with most ministries and look at data that was being used to understand the economy and understand social issues, and had a lot of demographic training. And I was recruited from there to CompuSearch in a time when CompuSearch, which was the original kind of micro-marketing company in Canada, they were expanding from focusing on retail to other sectors. So I actually went from the government to CompuSearch to sell data and analytics solutions back to the government sector. And my time at CompuSearch started off by building a practice and actually being in sales and consulting there. Eventually I became president and I focused on product. That was in 1993, and I ran that business from 93 to 2000, which was a really interesting time. The time in which people got customer databases, in which, microcomputers were available to everyone. So the ability to use data for decision-making was starting to be democratized. Anyway, after 2000, I left the industry and worked in a couple of other things. We all went .com, and that was going to be change our lives, and it certainly did, but not in the way I hoped. So I decided after being out of that data and analytics space that I wanted to come back in, and I put together a team of people and found investment partners, and we actually founded Environics Analytics. And 17 years later, we work for over 1,000 companies in Canada, companies and organizations. And what we do really is we help people solve business problems with statistics and mathematics and analysis. And, we provide a comprehensive database about Canadians right down to the 6-digit postal code level, all privacy friendly.
Right.
And we put it into software, and we hire people who are sort of half the staff are geeks and half the staff are industry experts. So we can really become an extension of the teams of marketers and location analysts and really help them use data at that very micro level combined with their data, and look at how do I get the right messages and the right products to the right people at the right time. And of course, in this era, using the right medium, because that's a really important part of what marketers have to deal with right now, and not just during the pandemic, but how can we have really a data-driven marketing spend and make sure that we're getting the return on investment. And I believe that you start with good insights, and then you have to be able to take action against those insights. So that's my journey.
Thank
I've
you.
always believed you could.
I've now established your great credibility. And, you know, I've actually attended a couple of Environics conferences, and you do celebrate geekness. I mean, I think that's a key part of the value prop that you add, that you got to start with the facts. You know, as you and I and others were getting into this pandemic, it was a bit of a shock to the system, and we spent our time you know, cloistered in one of our rooms in our house or apartment, and just kind of searching and scrounging for facts. And I think that was really difficult at the beginning, and the idea there's a lot of potentially false information or conjecture or opinion that was floated around. I was just thinking about, you know, the government in particular. They've had to make a lot of, and I think they've done a great job, by the way, both at the federal and provincial level, trying to make some really good, you know, policy decisions. How has geolocation data, how has that kind of helped feed that policy machine during this time?
Well, one of the key issues in understanding this is sort of, we're asking people to make a trade-off between sort of some of their personal needs around shopping and looking after their families, and then of course the health and well-being of the business economy and health. And so one of the key things that everyone has to understand is who's going where, and to what extent are people leaving their homes. And so we had been working for a long time on understanding how what we call mobile movement data could help marketers and other organizations understand who's going to what stores and when they're going, and so on. And so we worked really hard to kind of, hate the word, but we're all using it, pivot, and make sure that the data that we were producing about who was going where were of a high quality, obviously privacy compliant, and able to show who was leaving their homes and who was staying in. And so the very beginning of the stay-at-home orders, we could see, you know, where the compliance was high. About after the first weekend, after March 15th, about 17% of Canadians were leaving their homes, and the definition of leaving their homes was going more than 100 meters. And that was very different, though, by region, understandably. It was also very different by demographic group. Some people needed to go for work. Other people needed to or could go because they lived in a kind of a rural setting. But we worked with municipalities and with provincial and federal governments to help define what that measure needed to be, how those data could be of good quality, because you have to remember, you're not really your cell phone. So where your phone goes is a representation. But again, I won't get geeky on you, but there's lots of statistics and math and modeling that have to be done. You can't just take that cell phone ping feed and say, okay, that's what's happening. We normalize it and make sure that it's representative. But essentially, we started to monitor on a week-by-week basis, you know, who was staying in by urbanity, by demographic, using our PRISM system. And these pieces of data can actually help understand the extent to which people are complying, and also the extent to which it's possible to have people going out safely, because you can look at concentrations of people. And it's not particularly for enforcement, it's for understanding that policies can be made to help people, especially now, come back out and still stay safe.
Yeah, that's great. No, thank you for that. And you know, one of the issues that's embedded in that, I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit, is the notion of privacy. And you said that you know, people aren't their cell phone. It's an aspect, I guess, of us, and we feel that we rarely go anywhere without our cell phone or without our mobile device these days. We shift a little bit towards recovery. Is there a new trade-off, do you think, that's emerged through this crisis, that consumers are willing to make that, you know, a trade-off for either health or safety, or you know, even, you know, better products and services coming out of this pandemic, or is it too soon to tell?
No, I definitely think that there is a trade-off being made. And we had a consultation yesterday. We have a customer advisory board, and we had 12 customers on the line hearing about what they were challenged with. And they were talking about the value cliff and understanding, like if you feel safe buying your groceries at the corner store and paying extra money for that, then you'll continue to do that. But if you are economically challenged because you're not working, then you're going to want to go back out and shop further away from home. And so the data that can help really inform where that trade-off, what the devil's in the detail, for different products and services and different socioeconomic status, people are going to behave differently. Also different psychographics. We need to understand who are the risk takers. We were looking at some data that showed where people started coming out already. Everybody wants to get their hair cut. I need to get mine colored. And so who's going to be the first people back to the barber shop? And what we saw by looking through our new Prism segments, and by the way, we launched a brand new segmentation system that we do every 10 years. We launched 2020 yesterday. And so that means we can look at these data through a fresh lens. And what we saw is that, there's people going out and people not, but the kind of people who are very concerned for their appearance are trading that off against their concern for safety. And so we can actually see that from detailed data. We can see who's going. And then because we link a whole lot of databases together, we can say, people are making that trade-off between what they need, their personal desires, the economy, and safety. And that's going to happen for the next many months. Who knows? It's probably going to be a part of what marketers need to be taking into account for a long time.
Right. Yeah, I think so. And it's going to be different by region. So I think as well. I mean, my home is in Winnipeg, and we're in a very different place in this situation than downtown Toronto or even the suburbs. And so I think having that, not making blanket statements that apply to everyone based on one center, I think is important as well.
But what's really important about that, early on we had, everybody was saying, oh, the young people are out and about. And in our studies, we saw early that wasn't the case, that, there were groups of millennials, because we can see that through our lens, that were completely, observing the social distancing and the stay-at-home orders, and there are others who were doing less so. And it wasn't just, urban versus rural. It was right like in downtown urban areas, you got different kinds of behavior based on different psychographics and economic status. So we have to look at the details, and our marketing plans have to look at the details. We can't look in the broad brush and, as you say, make generalizations about what people are likely to do.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, let's talk about marketing now. What value do marketers get generally from geolocation data, coupled with psychographic segmentation? And what part of that is more pronounced because of the times that we're currently in?
Yeah. Well, you talking about geolocation data, again, this is anonymized tracking of where phones go, normalized to the population using good statistical methods. That's my definition.
Yeah.
So when we combine that with things like Prism and Wellscapes and our demographics, and with our customers' own data, here's some of the kinds of questions. Like, a lot of people who used to eat in restaurants every night, stopped completely, and they started to shop, and that, caused some significant lift for the food manufacturers and for some of the grocers. So, now we have to understand, are they going to keep doing that, or are they going to go back, or is it going to be mixed? And is it going to be, yes, some are and some aren't? And so what does that mean for store hours? What does that mean for product offering? And ultimately, what does it mean for the marketing spend? If I'm a grocer or a restaurant and I want to make sure that I'm responding to what my customers need in the pandemic and in the emergence, I got to understand the details of that. And that's where we think the movement data is going to be really helpful. And, we've traditionally been a company that produces updates annually or quarterly. Now we're going to be producing a weekly monitoring of who's going where, who's going out for work, who's going out for leisure, right, who's going out for shopping. with some detail. And this is going to help not just our stuff, but just viewing these kinds of habits in detail, going to help marketers understand really how to spend their advertising dollars. The other thing is that trend towards, you know, being online, we all knew we were headed in that direction, and all those things are still happening, but this situation has accelerated that. You know, the old people who didn't want to bank online and still wanted to go in the store, a lot of them have gotten online. People who weren't shopping online, gotten online, and same with restaurants. So a lot of things have been accelerated. And so how you shift your spending, and on the other hand, more people are watching TV. So that has an impact on your media spend as well. So there's lots of things that have to be really studied in order to make sure that marketers can connect. You know, we need to know our consumers and connect with them in the way they expect us to.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think it's brilliant that what you just said. And one of the things that I've always been very pro using creative agencies to help with your work, and not assuming you, because you know and understand how someone deals with, you think you know and understand how someone deals with financial services, but you really need to know that 360-degree view of your consumer. And so, like, as you're responding to the question, you're saying how they do this and how they do that. I think that's so important, that we are able to focus on how all that is changing, and in terms of different types of products and services that the consumer is looking for.
Well, the great thing is the technology has enabled us to work much more closely on the agency side with the trading desks, with a variety of platforms. Right. So that the deep insights work that advertisers and brands are doing to really understand the subsets of their consumer base and citizens, you know, sometimes used to get lost in translation because it'd come out in a PowerPoint and it'd go to someone who'd turn it into a, you know, a target group. Well, because technology has allowed us to make really direct connection between insights and execution. And we have 40 partners in Canada who take our data that our customers are using and put it inside their platforms or their services. So you can actually execute against your research instead of having that kind of being translated. We can execute much more in the technology, and that's the technology that's available to marketers right now has really enabled us to be much more effective and make that connection, and also measure what's working and what's not working. Because hey, we're going to be in a little bit of a trial and error situation with some of the new realities. So, you know, they have to remember to test, to measure, and learn.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about efficiency, because I know that the marketing budgets are going to be under pressure. Like all budgets are going to be under pressure if we come out of, and so there's going to be a lot of people, you know, the CFOs are going to say, prove it. You know, how can the integration of external data with marketers' own data help keep costs down as we kind of the same, or, you know, improve result for the same amount of money?
Yeah, I mean, that's how we improve things with data. When we combine data that people have about data about the whole market, then you can really start marketing not just to your existing customer base, but to your potential and your untapped potential. And third-party data can help you learn more about your customers than what you already know. Like, everybody has great data, not everybody, but most people have great data about their customers. Right. So, but by combining it to, you know, I always call it the denominator because I'm a mathematician, but you can look at the whole universe and you can identify the places where you can really spend against your best potential, whether that is by market, by segment, or by media. It's not a one-size-fits-all world, and the data and tech and know-how that we all have, both inside the brands and inside the agencies, can enable us to be data-driven in our marketing spend. And we're going to have to be, because people are going to have less dollars, and they're going to want better results.
Great. Can you give me a modern example of who's doing a great job on an integrated approach? Something recent?
Well, I think a couple of the interesting things, it has been in the government side. You know, some of the municipalities that we work with, and in the municipalities we work with those parts of the organizations, like the communications people, so it's more, they're government people, but they're thinking more and more like brands.
Right.
And one of the recent challenges that was put in front of us were municipalities who were really trying to figure out how to respond to people who were saying they couldn't pay their taxes and their utility bills. And these were not people that you would generally consider to be a part of the sort of low socioeconomic status, or people were financially vulnerable. These were people who were newly vulnerable because of the pandemic, having to do with their, you know, their family situation, their jobs, and their work situation. So we did a lot of processing of different kinds of variables and tried to help them be proactive, so that it's a balancing act. The governments can't go out and say to everyone, okay, don't worry about paying your bills. You know, municipalities can't even go into debt. So we helped municipalities with something called a new vulnerability index that showed a new kind of financial vulnerability that was really caused by the pandemic, and enabled them to look at neighborhoods. And so they could evaluate some of those asks. That's a kind of a different one. But in the more traditional sense, we have retailers who are trying to understand what hours to stay open for. And as we look at the people coming out of their homes, if the stores are going to be open and it's going to be much more expensive to operate the stores, then we can actually use the combination of historical purchase behavior and sort of focus on products with the movement data to say, okay, in this market, maybe open these 4 stores for full hours and these other ones you can do for shorter hours. So it's really a lot of, the traditional stuff about different kinds of customers and who's going to come and looking at marketing spend, yes, but some of these newer things are ways in which data can really help people.
It's interesting. I was on my drive yesterday. I stopped at the Hudson Bay store to buy socks, because I always buy my socks there, and I'm out of socks. It's a real tragedy. Anyway, so but I got there and I was like an hour and a half after closing, because all the closing times had changed. So I can definitely see how that would be useful too.
And for staffing too, I mean, we've got to thinking about our personal safety and our families, but these businesses and the employees need to be, we need to bring employees back, but the businesses can't pay for employees if the customers aren't there. So, changing hours and staffing, I think Canadians are good at pulling together. And I think, we have a role, data providers and marketers have a role in helping the Canadian economy recover by thinking smart and making good choices. And there definitely are trade-offs, and data are going to help us make those.
That's great. No, thanks, Jan. You mentioned earlier that the frequency of result that you're going to need on geolocation, in particular, to couple with your longer-term segmentation demographics. You're going to need to very frequently. Is there anything that you've seen in the trends of the data that you've done through the cycles that you've done that would lead you to have a better understanding of which things within the pandemic are going to keep on proceeding outside of the pandemic? Sorry, that was a really wordy question, but are you seeing any?
We're all trying to avoid that horrible expression about what's the new normal.
Yeah.
The examples of shopping and cooking, and I was asking yesterday, I was talking to someone from a large retailer who was looking at what was already happening in BC, and so far very mixed results. It's the devil is in the detail again, but people are coming back. Malls are where they have opened. There are people there. The numbers are down. Some of the questions, are, so this is coming more anecdotally than from data, because the data are just starting to come in. Now, having said that, we got the data yesterday. We have a consolidated database that come from 3 different sources. We didn't think that any one source had enough coverage for Canada. Right. In terms of the mobile movement data, because Canadians, are maybe have less of a tendency to turn location on, and we are only using data that's permissioned. So we actually had to combine 3 different sources. But having said that, comes into our system on a daily basis. We do our vetting and our modeling and our value added. And we yesterday had data about the tendency of the population to be leaving their homes last weekend. So these data sources can be done in real time. But the next 2 weeks as the different provinces open up at a different schedule for different things, we'll start to see, you know, who's going where and how long they're staying out. And again, as I mentioned before, you know, are we going back to where we used to shop, or are we staying safe and staying close to home? I know already from a little bit of data I've seen that it's really different for different people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, final opportunity here for us. If there was one piece of advice you'd have for marketers, something that they should do like right now to prepare for the future, what would that be?
Well, I always say the same thing, whether it's in a pandemic or not. You know, we live in an era of data-driven decision-making, and there's a lot of support for data and analytics, but there still needs to be an analytics strategy across the enterprise supported from above. And the only way you can get things done quickly, which means think about it differently, identify the business problems, is to have support from the CFO, the CEO, the C-suite, support marketers in their need to really be able to adopt an analytics strategy in order to make decisions about what to do. So it's a plea for everyone to really use data effectively to help Canada recover.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time here today. I know you're extremely busy and you're sought everywhere these days. And so thanks again for spending the time with us.
Thanks, John, for having me. And thanks again to the CMA for the great work that you're doing.
Wonderful. Tim, back over to you.
Thank you very much, John, and great conversation. I always love where we're bringing data to the perspective and really talking through the facts. It's certainly close to my heart. Jan, thank you very much for your insightful comments, and John for a great interview. We will be continuing the Marketing Connected Live platform, and our next one is coming up on June 5th, and that's with Tony Johnstone, former leader over at DDB, and we're going to be talking about what's going on in the branded space. And there's a new article that's posted on our website at thecma.ca as of this morning. So please do check that out and register for our next edition of Marketing Connected Live. As always, we've got a number of resources that are available for displaced marketers who have been members of the CMA. And so we do encourage you to let people know about these opportunities. They are available at our website at thecma.ca. and under the banner of CMA Helps. And then again, we also have a number of resources for marketers who are looking to navigate these difficult times, and that is in our Marketing Connected section. So please look at that at thecma.ca. And with that, we will close off our third edition of Marketing Connected Live today. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great weekend and do take care. Thank you.